Berry.
Hi, how are you?
I am well. I want to thank you again for taking this time to meet today. And I'm really looking forward to supporting you through this upcoming coaching cycle.
Thank you.
So let's start by talking about the lesson that you're planning. What will your students be working on during this upcoming class?
So we are reviewing verbals, which
Okay.
were gerunds, infinitives, and participles. And so it's one of those grammar topics that's kind of difficult for students to catch on to and a little bit confusing. So especially when identifying their functions and how they function in a sentence. So that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, it makes sense. With verbals, they're abstract at first, especially when they have to explain the function. Like, what's a function?
Right.
And not just pick them out or identify, what it is. So what's your learning goal for your students by the end of this lesson?
So by the end of this lesson, I want my students to be able to identify whether a word or a phrase is a gerund, a participle, or an infinitive. And so on top of identifying it, I also want them to be able to explain the function of the verbal. So that way, I would know if it's they would know if it's a noun, an adverb, an adjective. Being able to know what is this gerund function as, and not just looking at it as, oh, that's a verb, so it must be an action verb.
Right, got you. And that lines up perfectly with the standard, was it L1A? And it's great that you say you're not only focusing on just identifying, whether it's a verb, or, a gerund or participle or whatever, but I'm taking them a step further, and I want them to know how they're working in the context. So how does it function in a sentence?
Right, absolutely.
So when you think about your lesson and accomplishing that goal, what strategies are you thinking about to accomplish that end goal?
Okay, so one thing that we'll probably start off with is a mini lesson. And so we'll do a mini lesson using a few sentences and on the board, and then I'll give them like a guided handout so that way, we can work on these examples together. And then as they work in pairs to complete like short responses or short passages, we'll just have them find and label the verbals in the passages.
Got it. So it kind of sounds like I hear you saying that you will pretty much implement the gradual release model of responsibility with you first modeling, giving them explicit instruction before moving into more guided and then collaborative type work.
Exactly.
Got you. I remember in our last cycle, you mentioned that you were trying to get better, or you were interested in getting better at gauging or checking to see how the students are doing throughout the lesson. Would you say that that's still something that you would like to focus on this time around?
Yes, absolutely. I sometimes get to the end of the lesson and then I realize did some of my students catch it? And then if I don't realize it, in that moment, it might be, at the end of the lesson where they do their exit ticket and then I don't get to it the next day. And so I really do want more, exit tickets or just ways to check for understanding for them throughout the lesson, even if it's in the middle of the lesson, just before it's time for them to pack up, leave, and go to the next class.
Yes, that's a very valuable focus. So for this cycle, we'll hone in on how you implement checks for understanding during instruction. That includes noticing how, when you're gathering the data or the information on what students know, and then also what you do in response to that.
Right.
So when you gather the information, how you gather the information, and then what's your response to that. What kinds of CFUs have you used before?
Well, I usually, just do a cold call, or I might, ask a student if they know the answer to it, and they'll respond. And sometimes if they don't know it, they might shy down a little bit, but I've tried thumbs up. I've tried, sticky notes. I tried a lot of different things, and I'm still trying to figure out which the best one that works. But those are the main ones that I've been using lately.
And that's good insight. Whole class responses such as that give you a really good general response, a good pulse of how the whole class is doing. But with that, it's kind of hard to pinpoint individual students.
Yes.
But I want to know, have you tried cold calling or using quick responses or anything like that during your instruction?
So only thing with the cold calling is those that know it, those who are confident in it, they'll answer it. They'll be able to, because they know it. So if you know it, if you kind of don't, it kind of feels embarrassing. And so being in the room with students who are learning at different levels, everybody's learning at their own pace. I've used it, but I don't necessarily think it is the most effective way, just because if someone who doesn't know it, they don't say anything, I'm still, like you said, not able to individually find out, if they understand it or not. So I feel like it works at its own time, but when it's time for me to know exactly who needs help in the classroom, it's difficult.
What if we plan for a couple of intentional CFU moments during your lesson, like perhaps one after your mini lesson that you're going to give them, or one during the partner activity that you're going to give them, just helpful. Intentional checks so that every student will be able to demonstrate their learning and their understanding of that particular concept.
I think that'll be very helpful, and I think that'll work really well.
Okay.
So with the turn and talk after the examples, I would like that with having the turn and talk and having the two partners be able to work on the different sentences that we go over, and just having them to be able to know how they function as a verbal. And even as I'm walking around, just listening to a few students, see what they're getting from it, and even circulate with like a checklist. So that way I'm able to see and mark if they're identifying these verbals correctly. So I think that'd be a good, I think that's a good way to.
And that's a strong plan. That's a strong plan that you have, because what it does is it gives you data in that moment, and you're checking for both understanding, but you're also checking for misconceptions. So you're able to kind of do 2 for 1 there. I can collect some data too for you. Maybe I can track what CFU strategies you use or how many students demonstrate understanding at each point of that. But I can definitely help you track that data as you move along.
And that'll be very helpful, because there's a lot of times where I'm so focused on, managing the classroom, teaching the lesson, to where it's hard to find out who's getting in and who's not.
And that's totally understandable. So my notes will kind of be able to give you a fuller picture of what's taking place. And I'll also pay attention to how students respond when you ask questions to clarify. And then we can kind of reflect together afterwards.
Okay. Awesome. That makes me feel very good about, just how I can better help them out as a teacher, and be able to get those responses in real time, not after the fact.
That's the goal. That's responsive teaching. And just to summarize here, because we've discussed a lot. You're teaching students how to identify and explain the function of verbals in context. And then your focus is on how to use those checks for understandings to make adjustments when needed during the instruction.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to stop in and observe, and then we'll follow up afterward to reflect on what we noticed. And then we'll just kind of sit down and how we're doing now, and we'll just have a casual conversation. And then we'll move forward from there.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about anything?
I don't have any questions. I'm just excited about the next steps. Thank you.
Very good. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yes.
Okay.